What is up, guys? It's your buddy Blue Spooky here with another daily video. Your standard 1 hour and 30-minute affair. If you guys end up enjoying this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any thoughts about the stories in this video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as one of my favorite things about doing these videos is reading your guys' comments, even if I can't always respond to them. Last but not least, if you'd like to go that extra step and support the channel even more than you do by just watching the video already, go ahead and click that join button next to the subscribe button. It's $2 a month at the lowest tier, and you get a special icon next to your name when you comment, and special emoticons that you can use when you comment as well. No content will be locked behind the paywall, of course. It's simply something extra you can do if you'd like to support the channel a little more. Either way, I will get right into the video, and I hope you guys enjoy the true scary stories. Thanks for watching. I went to a pretty big college. It was several hours from the city where I'm from, and a few of my high school classmates also went there. This is something that happened during my junior year. I lived in a house with 3 of my friends, 2 of which went to high school with me. It was a 2-story house that we lived in, and was somewhat small, but did have enough space for all of us. When the school year started, I had a lot of students in most of my classes, because of how big our school was. I remember one class in particular had more than 200 students in it. I would go to the lectures each time on Mondays and Wednesdays, and would usually sit in the exact same spot. It took place in a very large room, with many seats in it. Over time, I would see a lot of the same faces in class, but I didn't really get a chance to make many good friends in there. I did note that this one guy in particular would always seem to sit around me. He would usually sit a few rows behind me, and was sort of tall with dark brown hair. I didn't really know anything about him, but I did recognize him at the very least. I began noticing him even more, though, when he started to seemingly follow me home. It all started one day after class when I walked out of the building, and I just so happened to notice him walking behind me. I would drive to class and back because I lived off campus, so I would walk down to the parking lot, get in my car, and then leave. It just so happened that he'd parked near me, so he did the very same. As far as I knew at a first glance, this was all just a coincidence. I would never pay attention to who was driving behind me anyway. This one time, though, I didn't go straight home. I decided to go to the school cafeteria instead, because I was feeling a little peckish. It was at that point I noticed the man behind me the whole time. He also went into the cafeteria after I arrived. I still didn't think that much of it, and thought maybe it was a coincidence. After I got inside and got food, I was not really sure which way he'd gone, mostly because I was minding my own business. The very next day of that class that we had, I left to go straight home as usual. I went for my car, and for whatever reason, I noticed the guy again as he went to his. It was still parked close to mine, but a little ways away. This time, though, I noticed him driving behind me the entire way until I got back to my place. When I parked on the side of the street in front of our house, he kept driving past me. One of the next times we had class, he followed me in his car again, but I wasn't driving back to my place this time. Instead, I had to stop by the gas station to get some gas. He just so happened to do the exact same thing. Now, it was starting to seem really weird. Surely this couldn't all be a coincidence. Was he following me? I decided to ask around the class the next time we had it. There were a few people who I sat by that weren't necessarily friends, but I would talk to them about various things. I pointed out the guy to them and asked if they knew anything about him. No one I asked seemed to know anything. I brought up the guy to my roommates as well, but they didn't have any idea who the guy was either. He was a complete mystery to me. All of a sudden, the guy just stopped showing up to class altogether. I remember he wasn't there 4 or 5 times in a row, and I really wondered why. At the same time, I was actually glad he wasn't there anymore, because now he was no longer following me. One night, I was returning home from my on-campus part-time job. It was quite dark out, and when I got to my street, I saw a man walking down the sidewalk in front of our house. As I got closer, I noticed it was that very same man. Obviously, I did not want to park my car right on the street next to him, or have him see me at all, really, so I kept driving and passed by our house. I couldn't believe that was him. I was telling myself that he must just live close to me, in this general neighborhood or something. I left our street and drove around the block to get back again. It took me a solid minute or two. I was expecting the guy to have gone on his way when I got back, but instead, when I pulled around again, he was still there, just kind of waiting, pacing about the area. He was right by where I normally park my car every day. I had a really bad feeling. I didn't want to take any chances, so I kept driving and decided not to go home. Instead, I headed back towards campus. I called one of my roommates and told her about this suspicious guy, and she went to check out the front window. She told me that she did see him, and she didn't know who he was either. She would let me know when he went away. I got a call about 30 minutes later, saying the man had finally left our property. Once more, I drove back home. After getting back, I looked all around the street and was quick to hurry inside the house. I didn't see the man anywhere at all. Not too long after that, I went upstairs to go to bed. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but one of my roommates soon woke me up. She told me the man had returned, and she'd already called the police. I was really confused. I had no idea what was going on. She led me into her bedroom, which had a window that looked out to the back of our house. We looked down and saw the man standing at the back door, seemingly trying to open it. He may have been back there the entire time. My friend said that when she saw him, he'd been there for quite a while. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning at that time. We waited upstairs and hoped the man wouldn't manage to get in. Luckily, he didn't seem to be as skilled at lockpicking as he was at following. When we heard the sound of a car driving down our street, it stopped by our house, and we saw the man attempt to run away. He ended up being caught by the police not too far away. I remember he claimed he was just trying to get to his friend's home, and he'd mixed up the address, quote-unquote. We all knew that was a brazen lie. It turned out the man didn't even go to our school and was never enrolled there at all. All those times he was in class with me, he had no reason to be there. Who knows what his real intentions were? This is something that happened when I was a kid. I was probably around 12 or so back then, and I would ride the bus to and from school every day. My parents both worked until 5 o'clock and would get home sometime between 5:30 and 6. I would get home at around 2:45 or 3 o'clock every day, so usually I'd have a few hours where I was all by myself. One day, the school bus dropped me off at the end of my street like every other day. I walked on the sidewalk until I got to my house and went inside. My after-school routine was usually to go to my room and try to get my homework done first. Then I would relax and do whatever I wanted, really, until my parents got home. This time, I did my homework at the kitchen table. As I was doing it, I remember glancing outside the window and seeing a man walking out on the front sidewalk. He walked right past our house, so I really didn't think too much of it at first. We usually wouldn't get too many people walking down the sidewalk, but an occasional person here and there wasn't super unusual. Thing is, later I saw the same man walking the other way. Again, 10 minutes later. He kind of looked over at me. Still, it wasn't a huge deal. The kitchen was at the front of the house. After I finished my homework, it was probably around 4 p.m. or so. I moved into the living room and turned on the TV. Just a few minutes later, I heard our front door opening. I knew instantly it was not either of my parents. I'm not sure how I knew that, but but I just got this intensely bad feeling. They were rarely home that early, and when they were, they would usually let me know. I realized I must have forgotten to lock the front door when I got home that day. I jumped up off the couch and didn't really know what to do. I ended up going right behind it to hide. I had no time to really go anywhere else. Whoever this person was, they walked inside and lingered in the kitchen for about a minute. I heard their footsteps moving closer, and then they entered the living room where I was. My heart was beating like crazy. There was a little bit of space between the couch and the walls behind it, and that's where I was currently, laying down on the carpet. I couldn't see anything. My head was down all the way. Now that the person was walking on carpet, I could no longer hear their footsteps anymore. I tried my best to be as silent as I possibly could. The seconds felt like minutes. I didn't hear anything, and I was afraid that whoever was in there with me, they must have known already that I was there. I heard footsteps again in the kitchen, and the footsteps soon moved to the stairs. I heard the person begin walking up. I was slightly relieved, but there was still a stranger in my home. I thought about hiding there until the person left, but when they reached the top of the stairs, I realized that I could probably leave. If I got up right now and ran as hard as I could, I should be able to reach the front door before the person could. I couldn't hear their footsteps anymore now that they were upstairs, so I didn't know their exact location. I carefully crept out from behind the couch and stood up. As quietly as I could, I ran for the front door. I threw it open and went outside. From there, I ran down the street to one of my neighbors that we were pretty good friends with. I knocked on her door, and luckily she answered. She let me come inside right away, and then called the police. It was great to finally be safe again, but that person was still in my house. To my surprise, the police response time was actually super fast. They were there within 3 minutes. My neighbor and I watched out her window when they got there. They entered the house and searched it. Unfortunately, the person was already gone. I went back to the house with the police, and everything seemed to be in order, except for my bedroom door upstairs. That was open, and that gave me an eerie feeling. Not too long after, I found out the police had found a suspicious man in another neighbor's backyard. When I saw what he looked like, I knew it was the same guy that had been walking on the sidewalk earlier. I couldn't believe it. He actually admitted to being inside my home. My parents got home a short time later, and the police stayed for a while, talking with everyone. Soon they left though, and things went back to normal for the most part. That experience made me not want to be home by myself for quite a while. It also made me remember to always lock the door. This happened years ago, and I still think about it all the time. During this time, I lived alone in a smaller house. I always considered my neighborhood and city to be quite safe. I knew a lot of my neighbors, and it was a very quiet neighborhood where not much happened at all. That's why this story is even more disturbing to me. One night, I was fast asleep. I had gone to bed at about 10 o'clock or so. That was all a part of my usual routine. What was unusual, though, was when at 2 o'clock in the morning, I suddenly woke up. Before I could even figure out what was going on, I heard the doorbell ringing. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the sound of anything can be startling and creepy. I sat up and tried to think of anybody who would be ringing my doorbell at 2 a.m. They rang again. I got out of bed and left my bedroom. I tiptoed down the hallway into the living room and peeked out the front window. There was a man, dressed up as a clown, standing on my front step. His face was all painted, and it was painted really well. He was wearing a clown costume, and it wasn't some cheap one you could get for $20 at the party store. This was a really elaborate costume. I moved back away from the window so the man wouldn't notice me. He knocked on the front door over and over. What did this guy want? I moved over to the end of my living room window, which was mostly covered. I was careful to be in a spot where he wouldn't be able to see me, and I peeked out and watched him. He kept standing there, just staring dead ahead at my front door. I watched him the entire time. All of a sudden he moved and left my front step. At first, I thought that meant he was finally leaving, but instead, after walking off my front step, he turned and headed down toward the side of my home. He wandered out of sight and was going near where my bedroom was. I left where I was at the window and walked to the hallway. I went inside my bedroom. As soon as I got in, I saw the clown looking directly through my bedroom window. I jumped back and left my room in a hurry. I was really creeped out to see that he somehow seemed to know where I spent the night. I wasn't really sure what to do. About a minute later, I decided to go back in my bedroom and check and see if he was still at the window. Carefully, I opened up the door and looked. He was gone. I felt better and hoped that this time he was finally gone for good. As I was standing there in my bedroom, though, suddenly there was a banging sound from my back door. Had to be the clown. He was pounding on the door about as loud as he could. At that point, I just called the police. I reported that a man dressed as a clown was in my backyard, banging on my back door. The clown stopped pounding, and I didn't go look and see if he was gone this time. Instead, I went back into the living room and waited for the police to arrive. Several minutes later, I decided to look out the windows again. I went to the back window and looked out of that one. When I did, I actually saw the clown. He was crouched down in the corner of my yard. When he saw me watching him, he moved out of it into my neighbor's yard. I kept watching as he went out of sight from there. Minutes later, the police got there. I told them what happened and gave them a description of the man. It would be quite hard to miss him. The police searched my yard, which was not very big, but the guy had already gone. They didn't find him on any of the immediate neighbors' properties either, so they didn't go into anybody else's yard. I was told they would drive around the area and look for the guy. In the meantime, if I saw that guy again, I was told to call back the police. After that, I stayed up for a while, checking all the windows, but the clown man did not return. After that night, he didn't come back at all. It was so random. I still wonder who he even was and what he wanted. What would have possibly happened if I had answered the door? I'm really glad that I didn't. Maybe it was just some guy trying to be a little trickster. I don't know. But it was still one of the creepiest things I've ever been through. A couple of years ago, I was walking home from work. Back then, I lived in this apartment building that was super close to my job. That meant usually I would walk to and from work. Well, to be honest, I really never looked into the weather all that much. One day, I went into work and it was a warm, sunny day when I got there. But when I got off at 11 o'clock at night, I remember seeing lightning off in the distance. It didn't appear to be raining where I was quite yet, though. I walked on the sidewalk for most of the way when I remember hearing somebody walking a ways back behind me. This continued until it started to rain. Seemingly within just moments, it began really pouring. I didn't have an umbrella or anything, so I began to run back home. Obviously, it also became very loud because of all the thunder and pouring rain. I basically sprinted the rest of the way back. Instead of taking 10 minutes, it probably only took me around 5. I arrived back at my apartment building. The building was not really that big, but it did have a couple of floors. I was on the second. When I made it to the sidewalk in front of my building, I stopped running and began to walk. I was soaking wet. About the time that I arrived at my front door is when I suddenly heard footsteps behind me again. As I opened up the door to my apartment building, I saw a man was right behind me. He started to come in the door after me. I didn't know who he was, and I didn't really know if he lived in the building or not. When I got inside, I was in the first area. There was another door you had to unlock to get in. I stopped in that area to check the packages left in the entranceway. I wasn't expecting a package per se, but I was doing this to let the man go in front of me. Except when I did, the man tried opening the locked door, and when it wouldn't open, he just kinda stood next to it, almost as if he were waiting for me to unlock it for him. The guy was wearing a black rain jacket with the hood all the way up. He appeared to have dark hair and did not say anything as he just stood there. I would have to go in, so I walked over to the door and used my key fob to unlock it. When I did, the man opened the door and walked right in. He did it before I did. It was kind of rude, but I watched him go right down the hallway. I went to the elevator myself, which was very close by. I went up to the second floor and got off. My room was just a short way down the hallway. I arrived at my door, unlocked it, and went inside. I was still soaking wet, so before doing anything else, I went to my bedroom. I took off my sweatshirt, which had gotten the most wet, and put it in my hamper. Right when I entered my bedroom, though, I heard the front door to my apartment opening. It seems I'd forgotten to lock it. I didn't know who this could be. I quickly went to my bedroom door and slammed it closed, then locked that. I heard footsteps entering my place and beginning to wander around inside my apartment. The person inside did not say anything. I decided to ask who it was and called out to them. I also asked them what they were doing, but I heard no response. I heard the person wandering around and then opening a door of some sort, but I couldn't tell which door it was. Finally, I called the police. I was told they would be there very soon. I yelled to the person in my apartment that I had phoned the police already. I was hoping this would scare them off, but they still didn't say anything. After I said it, I heard them continuing to just wander around my place. The footsteps got closer, and I heard them get right outside my bedroom door. They tried opening it and slowly walked away after it wouldn't budge. Not too long after this, I stopped hearing the footsteps altogether. Things seemed to get very quiet. I wasn't really sure what had happened. Several minutes later, I still hadn't heard anything other than the thunderstorm in the distant background. There was a sudden knock at my front door. I figured that had to be the police. I carefully opened up my bedroom door and looked out. The place appeared to be empty. I went over and saw the police by my front door. I opened it up and let them in, and I explained what happened. They searched my entire apartment, but nobody was there. I really think it must have been that man who I let into the building that had gotten into my apartment. I told the police that, but I didn't have any direct proof. They left, and I made sure my door was locked this time. I had no problems after that. I still think it was that man. I also think he was the same person who had been walking behind me on the sidewalk after I left from work. That means he must have run home after me in the rain the entire way there. It gives me the creeps just to think back to him. This is something that happened one time when I was going on a road trip. I was driving really late at night on the highway when, basically out of nowhere, this car started tailing me. I don't recall exactly when it started. I just know that I saw headlights pop up behind me. I was driving like normal, but when I got stuck behind a semi-truck, I wasn't really thinking. I just started going really slow for a long time. The semi was going at least 5 miles below the speed limit. Normally, in this kind of situation, a car would go into the left lane and pass by the slower truck. I was just paying more attention to driving and listening to the radio. I'd been driving for so long that I was just fine with going slow for a while. There weren't really many cars on the road at this time, so I was driving behind the truck for at least 5 minutes. That car behind me kept tailing me really closely. I came to my senses and wondered why we were bothering to go so slow. I changed lanes and went into the left lane. As soon as I did this, the car behind me did the same thing. I noticed that then I passed the truck and moved on to the right lane, and the car following me did the same maneuver. I found this somewhat odd, but still nothing really to worry about. The car following me was kind of close though. Things remained like this for the next 10 minutes or so. I had a bad feeling about how closely the car was sticking to me. I was really taking notice of this odd behavior. I approached another semi going slow in the right lane. When I did this time, I decided to wait back again and see if the car behind me would do the same. I slowed down quite a bit, and the car behind me did the exact same thing. I went slow behind the truck for at least a few minutes. Then, in one instant, I put my turn signal on and changed lanes. The car behind me immediately did this as well. After making it around the truck and settling back into the right lane again, the car was still behind me, following the exact same distance. We drove like this for a while, and I was getting quite frustrated. I wanted this vehicle to leave me alone. That's when I decided to take the next exit and see what would happen. Now, we were kind of in the middle of nowhere, so I was just hoping there would be a truck stop or some kind of business with people around. Several minutes later, there was an exit. I took it, and the car behind me did as well. I took a right, but realized that there didn't seem to be anything over here. It looked like mostly country land on both sides of the road. I took my phone out and tried to look up the nearest police station, but I had no service, being in the middle of nowhere and all. I ended up messing up my directions and losing my map. Meanwhile, I was driving down this quiet road, with the car still right on me. I took another turn, and so did the car following me. After that, I just started making random turns. Each time I did, the car behind me did as well. I really couldn't believe this. This car was keeping pace with me so well. I continued to make more random turns and realized that now I was completely lost. I had no idea how to get back to the highway. At that point, I started trying to figure out how to get back. I would honestly rather be followed on the highway than down these random country roads. At least on the highway there were some other cars, and I would be able to get to an actual city eventually. For the next 10 minutes or so, I kept making random turns, but in an effort to find my way back. In the middle of this, though, randomly, the car following me took a different turn. I honestly couldn't believe it. I kept going, though, and didn't see the car again after that. I continued making turns here and there for a while longer. Then I noticed that I actually had reached an area with phone signal again. I punched directions back in and was soon able to make it back to the highway. I then continued my drive for the rest of the way, and nothing else like that happened. I don't know why that car was doing that to me. I don't know who it was or why they suddenly stopped either. That was my scariest road trip experience, though. In August of 2019, I was using Facebook Marketplace to look for some furniture. I had used Facebook Marketplace as a way to both buy and sell things several times before. For me, it had worked out great up to that point. However, I had the weirdest experience in my life the last time that I tried to use it. I remember that I found this desk that seemed to be fairly good. I was looking for a very basic one that I could paint and do various other things to customize my own way if I wanted to. I was searching for really cheap ones, and I found one that I really liked for about $10. I contacted the seller and said I would come over the next day and come grab it. The seller was a guy named Corey, so Corey told me to come over any time. All I had to do was let him know before I did so. The next day, he gave me his address and I texted him when I was ready. I put his address into maps on my phone and started to drive over there. I drove my SUV and removed the back seats to fit the desk. When I arrived in Corey's neighborhood, it did not appear to be very nice. Several of the homes seemed to be vacant or even abandoned. Some had overgrown grass and trees in the front yard, and others even had graffiti on them. Corey's place was not too much nicer. It was a small white house that was extremely dirty and had long grass. I looked multiple times just to make sure I was in the right place. I parked on the side of the road and texted Corey. He told me to come on inside. I walked up through the yard of overgrown grass and then onto the front step. I knocked on the door and waited for almost a full minute before the door opened. This man with long hair and a big beard answered. I told him I was there for the desk he was selling on Facebook Marketplace. He told me to come inside and pointed over to the desk. It was sitting on the ground not far away from the front door. Strangely, inside of Corey's home, there appeared to be almost no furniture of any kind. That was really strange. When I walked over, Corey offered to help me with the desk. We both grabbed one end and carefully lifted it. Then we walked it to my car and put it in the back. I paid Corey the money, and overall he seemed to be a fairly nice guy. Then he went back to his house and I got inside my car and drove away. After getting back home, I was able to unload the desk by myself and get it inside. I took a good look at it for the first time. The desk had a few drawers and I realized they were all empty except for one. Inside of the drawers in the very back, there was an envelope taped to the inside of it. I was curious as to what it could be. I took it and opened it, and inside were a bunch of pictures. They were all taken from a disposable camera. Most of the pictures were from my Facebook profile. It was like somebody had taken a picture of the computer screen. It really freaked me out when I saw it. There were a few others as well. One was a listing of my apartment building online. That one really confused me at first, but then I saw a few more pictures. They were all of me. It was as I was walking up to Corey's house, and when I was getting out of my car. I was so freaked out by this, but I didn't know what to do. I went on Facebook again to try to find Corey's account, but I couldn't. He was either gone, or he deleted his account, or he blocked me or something. After that, I just kinda moved on. I still have the desk, and I don't know where the envelope of pictures are right now. I think I lost them somewhere. I'm just glad I never saw Corey again after. Maybe it was his idea of a joke or something, but it sure was fairly creepy. Maybe not the scariest thing that's ever happened to me, but it just happened, so it's the most vivid experience I have. I was out walking my very small dog around the block this morning when I passed a couple of guys in a raggedy-looking truck, scoping out lawns in the neighborhood. I wasn't too suspicious at first, because we often have scrapers drive around on trash days who see if people are throwing away things they find salvageable. When I passed by them, though, their gaze instantly snapped to me, and the way they stared at me made me feel nauseated. I was petrified. Something in my mind was telling me these guys were dangerous. I tried to just play it cool and keep on walking, because I didn't want to draw their attention any further. They yelled something at me and began to honk their horn, but I refused to turn around and look at them. At this point, I thought I was gonna die of fright. They turned the corner and circled around the block several times, all while staring at me. By this point, I was cursing myself for leaving my phone on the charger at home. As soon as they turned the corner again, I picked up my dog and began running as hard as I could for a neighbor's garage that had their car parked. I hid out for about 10 minutes as the men continued to circle the block looking for me. I waited until I thought they were probably gone and ran all the way home through my neighbors' yards, away from the roads. When I got home, I locked all the doors and cried like a baby. That was only 4 hours ago, and my chest still feels tight from the panic. It's been a long, long time since I've felt that threatened. This happened back when I was a kid. I don't remember every detail super well, but I will tell you everything that I can. I believe I was somewhere around 10 years old at this time. I lived with my parents and 2 siblings in a pretty average-sized house in our neighborhood. There were lots of other houses around as well. I would often go out into the front yard or backyard to play around with my siblings. One time, I know that I was in the front yard, but I was by myself for whatever reason. I was playing with this dodgeball that we had, just kinda randomly kicking it around. One of the times that I kicked it, I guess it went a little bit far and ended up going out into the street. Now, the street that we lived on was pretty quiet usually. There were not many cars driving down it. My parents still always told me not to leave our yard, but I had to go get the ball. I started to chase after it as I saw it rolling down the street. When I got out into the street, I was still a long ways away from the ball. That's when I noticed a man standing on the side of the road near the sidewalk. He was a few houses down from mine. He walked over and picked up the ball. There were a few cars parked on the side of the road as well. The man was standing as if he'd just recently gotten out of one of them. I went a little bit closer, and when the man finally noticed me, he waved me over. I remembered that I thought he would toss the ball back to me, so I waved back at him and held my hands out for the ball. Instead, he continued to wave me over to him. I walked the rest of the way toward the guy, and when I got to him, he asked if this was my ball. I said yes. The guy then unlocked the car parked right next to the road that was by us and tried to get me to go inside of it. I don't remember exactly what he said word for word, but I think he told me that he'd give me the ball back if I went with him. I just know that while holding on to the ball, he got into the driver's seat and then opened up the back door. Even though I was young, I knew better than to get inside some random guy's car. I was still really confused. I wasn't even sure who this guy was, nor why he was here in the first place. After sitting in the driver's seat of the car and opening the back door, he then tossed the ball into the far back seat and motioned for me to climb in. Instead, I turned around and ran back toward our house. I knew that this guy was trouble. He didn't try to chase after me, and when I got back into the front yard, I finally stopped and watched as the guy drove away in the opposite direction, not going by our house. I went inside and found my mom. I told her about what just happened, and she went outside, but obviously the guy was gone. She ended up calling the police about it, but unfortunately I could not give very good detail. I didn't know the license plate or what make of car it was. To this day, I don't really remember any details like that. The man got away with stealing my ball, sure, but most importantly, he was not able to kidnap me. I do remember that a couple of years later, I think maybe when I was 12 or 13, I was going on a walk through my neighborhood, and I happened to be one street over from mine. I rarely went to the street when I was a kid, but I know that when I was walking down it, I happened to pass by this one house, and I saw that guy outside in the yard. When I saw him, I instantly snapped back to that man from all those years ago. I wasn't 100% sure, but I was pretty sure it was the same guy. I never said anything or did anything about it, because again, I couldn't be 100% sure, and I didn't want to accuse some innocent guy, but I still think to this day that that was the same person. A few years ago, we had a garage sale at our house. I live with my husband in the suburbs, and being in a large neighborhood, we decided to have a sale. After cleaning out the house, there were quite a few things that we did not need anymore, and we wanted to see if we could get any money for any of it. With anything that didn't sell, we would probably just go and donate it someplace. We went through everything and organized all the stuff. We set it up in our garage and driveway, and we're selling quite a few things. Our garage was normally very clean and empty, aside from the car and a few other things. There was a fridge, a lawnmower, those sorts of things. There was still plenty enough space to set up folding tables and put things on display, though. In case it rained, we prepared to move everything into the garage to stay dry as well. We had the sale over a weekend, and luckily it did not rain. The weather was actually great, and quite a lot of people showed up as a result. My husband and I took turns sitting in a chair at a table and acting as a cashier. I remember that at the end of the day on Saturday, we had sold quite a few items and made more money than we thought we would. At about 6 p.m., we were done for the day. I stayed as cashier while my husband drove around and picked up all the signs for our sale. We had put one at a busy street corner nearby and another a little bit closer, directing people to our home. He also took out the signs in the yard. We had just a few people still there, looking around. When they left, we started to put everything back inside. We were going to be open for just a few hours the next day to see if any last-minute items would sell. After we got everything back inside the garage, we closed it and went inside. It was a normal Saturday night. After that, several hours went by, and my husband and I were in the living room, watching some movie on the couch. Out of nowhere, though, we heard a door open and shut. I had no idea what that could be. We got up and started walking over toward where the noise had come from, which appeared to be the kitchen area. When we went over there, I remember seeing this guy for a split second inside of our house. Then he ducked out of the area of the room that we could see. We moved back and away in the other direction, and my husband and I both ran to the other end of the house. We went to our bedroom, closed the door, and called the police. It happened so fast. The only thing that we knew for sure was that some random guy was currently in our home. How he got in or anything like that, we had no idea. I remember sort of hearing the guy wandering around the house on the other side. We went to the back corner of the bedroom and then into the connected bathroom. We just wanted to get as far away as we possibly could. Who knew what this guy was capable of? The police were on their way, but the man was still inside of our house wandering freely. It was a terrifying moment. Was the man dangerous? What did he want? Would he try to come after us specifically? We didn't really hear much of anything over the next few minutes. It felt like forever as we waited for the police in that time, and we really didn't do much other than listen and try to tell where the man was. The police finally arrived to our home and searched the entire place. They found a man hiding in our basement area. He refused to give a reason as for why he'd entered our home, but it didn't take long for us to find out how he'd gotten in. He had entered through our attached garage. I realized he must have hidden in the garage during the garage sale, somewhere out of sight where none of us thought to check. He was in there when we went inside, and so he was able to walk right in. We typically did not lock the door leading from the garage to inside our home. That was because the garage door outside was always locked and far more sturdy. I thought of the garage almost like another room in the home and didn't feel the need to lock it at all. Obviously, that changed after this event. I'm not sure what the man's plans were. He may have thought we had gone to sleep or something and was going to try and steal from us because he had been inside the garage waiting for hours. I'm just glad he didn't try to harm us and that the police easily found him. I'm a 26-year-old woman. Earlier this year, I met up with one of my best friends, Courtney. It was a Friday night, and we went to a local village next to the center of town. There were some restaurants, and there was also a park with live music being played. We had made reservations to the restaurant, but got there about an hour early to walk around and enjoy the night. It was very nice weather that evening, and lots of other people were out and about. Courtney and I walked over to the concert, and there was a bit of a crowd standing nearby. We hung out there for a while until it was time for our dinner reservations. While we were over there, I took a picture of Courtney and I and posted it to my Snapchat story. We went to the nearby restaurant and walked around the plaza after we left. We each went home now. After arriving back at my apartment, I saw that I had a few Snapchat notifications awaiting me. One of them in particular caught my eye though. Some guy who I did not know had responded to my story. He responded to the photo of Courtney and I. The response was something like, "I was behind you guys." I didn't have any clue as to who this man was. I didn't even remember becoming friends with him on Snapchat. I realized that he must have recognized us though, and also been at that same concert thing. I responded with something like, "Oh, that's funny." What he said next unnerved me. "Yeah, I was watching you the whole time." I was a bit creeped out by that response, but I hoped and assumed he was just joking. I did not respond to that one. The man sent another message a short time later. I looked and he asked where I was going next weekend and said he would watch us then too. I asked the man who he even was and was wondering why and when I even became friends with him. The man did not respond and simply left me on read. After that, obviously I blocked him. I started talking to Courtney and telling her of the strange situation. Courtney said that guy had also sent her some Snapchats that same night. She mentioned how creepy he was being and how she too did not know who he was. After that, she blocked him too. I remember that for the next few days and the next time I saw Courtney, I was more than a little paranoid. Luckily, I did not see that guy anywhere around us, and nothing strange has happened since then. At least, it doesn't seem to be that way to me. I still don't know, and I'm not sure if he was actually at the concert thing and watching us, or if he was just saying that. I also don't know if he'd been following us for longer than that. I'm just hoping that if he is a stalker, that I never encounter him again. When I was in high school, during sophomore year, we took a trip to a local museum. It was a common place for local people to go, a history museum. I had been there once before, but not with the school. The museum was fairly large and had a lot of different rooms in various areas. When we got there, I remembered that it was not my entire school or grade, just my history class, so there were about 20 of us in total. We did not by any means rent out the museum or anything like that, so other regular visitors were there as well. Still, it was not too busy, what with it being a weekday morning and all. The field trip was going to last for several hours. For about 15 minutes, someone who worked there came out and talked to us. Then we could wander about the museum at our own pace. My friend in this class was Anna, who I had known since elementary school. Anna and I walked from room to room, and before long, most of the kids had been pretty spread out. We got into this one room at one point, which was a little bit darker, not as much light in there. Anna and I were in the corner looking at something when this man walked into the room. He walked slowly towards us, but stopped a little ways away. I noticed that he seemed to just be looking at us. I didn't really think much of it. The guy walked closer to us, and then went into this prohibited area of the exhibit. He did not appear to be an employee of any sort, as the employees would all wear the same outfits, and this guy was not wearing one. The guy went into the area that was employees only, and then we could no longer see him. Anna and I both found this strange. We moved on and continued into another area. I remember that we didn't see the guy again for a while. Later on, we were having lunch, and there was an option to go outside where there were some tables. Not many people went out, because there were more tables inside. However, Anna and I, as well as maybe 3 other kids, went to eat outside. We were chatting, just sitting there, when I noticed the man again. He just appeared randomly outside, in a little grassy area with some trees and stuff. The man was standing right by a tree and looking over at us. Something about this guy really gave me the creeps. I just ignored him though, and kept talking with Anna. Sometime later I looked up, and the man was still watching us. I didn't know what the man was doing exactly. I told Anna about seeing him, because she was sitting with her back to the guy and could not see what he was doing. After a little while, I really could not believe that he was still observing us. At that point, we decided to go back inside the building. We stayed there for the rest of the time. Shortly after it was time to finally leave, we all went to the parking lot out front to board onto the bus. When we did, I saw the man standing in the parking lot. He wasn't really by any particular vehicle. More, it looked like he was just wandering around looking for something. After getting into the bus, Anna and I were sitting next to each other, and we looked out the window. We saw the man's eyes lock onto us, and he began a creepy smile, waving at us. It was very strange. He continued that until we left and drove off. Luckily, we never saw him again after that. A few years ago, back when I was in high school, several classes from my school went on a field trip. We were going to a play that was being put on at a theater in the nearby city. It was pretty large and a nice theater, and well known in the community. We left school early in the morning and rode the bus down. It took about 30 minutes, and by the time the ride was over, I really had to use the restroom. When we got to the theater, the classes all filed into the auditorium, but I rushed off to find the bathroom. It took me a good minute to find it, but I was able to locate it a little further down the hallway. I was not inside for long, and after I left, I walked to the auditorium to be seated. When I got there, it looked like everybody had already sat down. Apparently, there was not assigned seating, so I just found the nearest open area, which happened to be in the very back. I ended up not sitting by anybody that I knew at all. I was on an end seat off to the right, before the last row. After that, the play started. The lights turned down and everybody focused their attention on the stage. I followed along for the first 15 minutes or so, when suddenly there came a tap on my shoulder. I looked over to my left, and there was some random guy standing there in the aisle. I didn't know him, but he whispered into my ear that he had to see me. I assumed that he must work there or something. I didn't know why I was being asked to leave, but I got up and went with the guy. After walking out of the auditorium, he told me to follow him. We went down the hallway, and he took a left into another nearby hallway. Both hallways were mostly completely empty because the show was currently going on. When we got to the second hallway, though, I saw these two other guys there. They told me to follow them. I had no idea who any of them were, and they were all dressed pretty well. They looked professional. I asked why, but they refused to answer me. By now, I had gone from feeling confused to very suspicious, and also scared. We kept going down the hallway. When I saw an exit door we were heading toward, I stopped and said that I could not leave because I was with my class. The men didn't say anything. One of them grabbed my arm, though. When he did this, I freaked out. I yelled for them to stop and turned around and tried to run in the opposite direction. The man let go of me, and I ran all the way back to the original hallway. When I arrived, I saw an actual employee of the theater. I approached him. I tried explaining what just happened, and the man just seemed really confused. I asked if any of those men like that worked at the theater, and he said no. I walked back over with him to the hallway they'd gone down, but the men were no longer anywhere to be seen. The employee said he would report it to security, and I could go back to my class if I wanted. I went back to the play and finished watching it. After that, I never really heard anything more about the situation. I still don't know what exactly happened, but I'm really glad that I got away from those guys. Back when I was in high school, I was in a class where we took a field trip to the local park. The park that it was at was very large and had tons of trails on it. We were going to take a hike for class, and then we were going to have some sort of picnic or other. I remember we met in the classroom and then walked out to a bus and boarded it. It was around a 10-minute drive to the park. We all got off the bus and our teacher led us on the hike. We all followed him. The class was about average sized. I didn't really have any good friends in it. I walked with everybody else down the different trails, and the entire hike lasted probably 45 minutes or so. Toward the end of it, though, I remember we were walking through this area with really thick woods on both sides of the trail. It was also a somewhat narrow passage. When we were walking through this part, I saw some of my classmates looking over to the left. I thought maybe they saw an animal or something, but instead I heard somebody say there was a man out in the woods. A few of us stopped and looked over. When I did, though, I didn't see anything at all. I did hear some strange noises, and I heard a kid say something like, "There he goes!" I kept looking, but I didn't see the person. A bunch of us were watching for him, but the people at the front, like the teacher, didn't seem to have noticed anything was amiss. A few more moments of looking, and we finally continued on with the group. The rest of the hike lasted for maybe 5 more minutes or so. Then we left the woods and went over to the area in the park with some open grass and picnic tables. This was back by the bus, as well as near where we had started the path. Basically, we'd done a really big long loop. The teacher went and grabbed up all the food and was setting things up. The rest of us were just hanging out in the grassy area, talking. I got kind of bored since I didn't really have anybody to talk to myself. I decided to walk just a little ways back into the woods on the path. At first, I went there just because I was bored. After walking a little ways, though, I remembered that kid that saw a man out in the woods, so I went further to see if I could find anything myself. After walking down the path for a little while, I actually heard a noise a ways inside of the woods. I stopped and looked. It was from somewhere up ahead of me and off to the right of the path. I looked around, and soon the noises got louder. All of a sudden, a man actually burst out of the woods onto the path. He was this really dirty-looking guy. He stared right at me as I stood there. I did not say anything. I was just kind of shocked to even see the man. All of a sudden, he began just running right at me. I turned around and took off sprinting back toward my class. The man continued chasing me, though. I was running as fast as I could, but the man seemed to be gaining on me. After running as hard as I could, he finally slowed down a little. I feel like he could have caught up to me if he wanted to, but he just stopped chasing me. Not long after, I finally reached the end of the woods. Again, I rejoined my class. I found a kid and told him about the man chasing me. We both then went back down the pathway a bit, but didn't see the guy anywhere. I was too scared to venture any farther, so we went back. After that, I didn't go into the woods again, and I didn't see the guy for the rest of the field trip. I'm not sure what he was doing in those woods or why he chased me, but I was really creeped out by it. This happened last year, and still creeps me out when I think of it. I was at home one night by myself, in my bedroom, scrolling through my phone. All of a sudden, I got this Snapchat notification from a name I did not recognize. Obviously, I was curious, so I went to Snapchat and opened it to see what it was. It was a selfie of what appeared to be a random man. However, the photo was taken extremely close up to his face, and he was in a dark room, so you could barely see him at all. I didn't recognize it to be anybody that I knew. The picture honestly looked very unsettling. There were no words attached either. That was it. I guess at some point I must have become friends with whoever this guy was, but I didn't possibly know when that could be. I'd had Snapchat for probably 10 years now. I did not send a picture back, but instead typed a message asking who this even was. He sent another photo immediately, which I then opened. I saw it was much like the one from before. It was honestly so unsettling. I wish I would have screenshotted it so I could share it with you all. At the moment, I didn't really think of that though. I thought maybe the person had sent a picture like this by mistake or something, but after the second one, I realized it was not a mistake at all. I again asked who this even was. The person's response immediately shocked me. "I'm coming over now." I thought that he had to be joking, but I realized in that moment that I actually had my location on Snapchat. I quickly went in the settings and turned my location off immediately. If this guy was serious, I was hoping he would not have had a chance to discover where I was. I then blocked the mysterious man. I thought that would be that and returned to what I was doing, but I couldn't help but feel at least a little bit creeped out by the whole endeavor. Roughly 30 minutes later, there was a sudden knock at the front door. I had a terrible feeling. I think by now it was about 10 o'clock at night, not exactly a normal time for someone to be stopping by. I carefully left my bedroom and went down the hallway. Eventually, I got to a window I could peek out of and see who was there. When I did, I saw a man outside, wearing a mask and just standing there. I couldn't believe it. The guy must have gotten my location before I managed to turn it off. I watched him knock on the door again. He started to look around. When he did, I immediately backed away from the window. I heard the man wander off the front step, but I did not know where he was going to. Next thing I knew, I heard him right outside one of the main windows. I ran back into my bedroom and called the police immediately. I locked my bedroom door and covered my bedroom window. Then I just waited. I did not hear anything during this time, so I wasn't sure what exactly was going on. Was he trying to break in, or did he leave already? About 10 minutes later, the cops arrived. They came to the front door, and I told them about what happened. They offered to take a look around. I almost said that they didn't have to, but I ended up saying sure anyway. They looked around in my backyard, where surprisingly, they actually found the man hiding in my bushes. When they located him, they asked him to come out and he ignored them. He tried to run past them. However, the police easily caught him before he even left the yard. It was the same man who had been Snapchatting me. I'm not sure what exactly his plans were, but I'm glad that he was caught. For some background to this story, I'm a woman and was 17 at the time this happened. I was a senior in high school and live with my parents still. I have Snapchat and I've had it ever since middle school. Actually, it was a fairly common way for me to talk with my friends. Occasionally, I would get added by random people who I didn't know. I would say it happened about once every 2 weeks or so. I never once added any of those people back, unless I knew exactly who they were. When I was much younger, I did try to add some random people back, but I soon discovered that they were all very weird, without saying anything more, so I stopped doing that. I remember one day I got added by some random guy on Snapchat. Obviously, I didn't add him back and immediately deleted his request. I think it was the next day, or maybe 2 days later, I got added by one of my friends from school. It was not one of my best friends or anything, but somebody I knew decently well. Thing is, I was already friends with this person on Snapchat. When I saw that, I wondered if maybe she'd made a new account in high school. It was not uncommon for people to make new accounts for various reasons, especially when they moved up in grades. I didn't really think too much about it. I added her back. That afternoon, after I arrived home from school, I was in my bedroom at my desk when that same friend sent me a message. She asked me what I was doing, and I said I was just at home doing some homework. She told me that she was going to come over soon, and I said okay. It seemed a little bit odd, though. This particular person had only come over to my house once or twice. It had been a really long time since then. I hadn't hung out with her in a while, really. At this time, my parents were still away at work, so I was home all by myself. About 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door, which I assumed to be my friend. I was still a little bit confused that she was coming over at all, but she also did not text me on Snapchat to say she was there or anything. I left my bedroom and walked out into the living room. I soon saw, though, that there was not my friend standing at the front door. Instead, it was a random man. I had no idea who he was or what he was doing at my home. I decided not to answer the door. Luckily, he had not seen me when I looked out the window. I then went back to my bedroom. When I did, I saw my friend had messaged me on Snapchat. She told me she was outside and asked to be let in. Now I knew what was going on. This was not at all my friend, but that man pretending to be her. Instantly, I blocked the account. I went back out into the living room and saw the man was still lingering there. I wasn't sure what I was going to do about it. That's when I noticed my dad's car going down the street. He was coming back home from work. As soon as he pulled into the driveway, the man at the front step took off running. He left the front yard, going back out into the street. My dad came inside and mentioned how he'd seen a strange man running from our yard. I told him what happened, and he called the cops. We talked to them when they came out, and they said they would look into it. The man must have known my friend's name if he pretended to be her. How he even knew who I was, I don't know. My best guess is he must have seen me on Facebook or Instagram or something, or maybe even in person. He must have looked at my friends list on Facebook to get her name, and then tried to impersonate her on Snapchat. It was crazy, but luckily I never heard from him or saw him again. The night that this happened to me was many years ago. Probably about 20 years ago now, actually. My single father moved myself and my two little sisters to a not terrible but also not great suburb of Denver, Colorado. The divorce had really shattered him and our home. My mother left him for another man, and the burden of raising 3 girls befell on him. Skip forward a couple of months. My sisters were 8 and 6 now. We had grown fairly accustomed to the neighborhood by then, and the surrounding areas as well. My dad had a schedule of working 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. out in Denver, where all the best pay was. Because of this, the responsibility for my 2 little sisters became mine. I was the eldest, after all. We hadn't quite melded with the other kids in the area yet, but being the 3 of us, we didn't really mind. We were capable of entertaining ourselves. We used to ride our bicycles everywhere, to all the surrounding neighborhoods, the hiking trails along the river, and pretty much everywhere else, even along the train tracks. We could find various amounts of them throughout town. One set of train tracks in particular, in fact the closest to our home, had a long ditch almost like a valley along both sides of it. I think in retrospect it must have been some sort of barrier to prevent the river from flooding out the neighborhood across the street. Anyway, on one side of the tracks, it was a sheer drop-off with heavy bushes and undergrowth preventing the ground from being easily accessible. On the other side, there had been a path carved out. It appeared to be carved out by vehicles, maybe servicing the train tracks perhaps in prior years. It was extremely deep though, and they called it Dead Man's Ditch. As I said, we used to ride our bikes around town a lot, especially in the summertime during the day, while our dad was at work. We would sometimes travel further away than he really allowed us to. We also had a game we played similar to Punch Buggy, combined with a license plate game. If any of us saw a license plate with double or triple characters consecutively, for example double B's or triple zeros, we would announce it and then attempt to hit one another. It was a barbaric game, but we were siblings having fun, so it wasn't too outlandish. I'm not going to share mine nor my sister's names here, but on this particular day we had been riding around for hours already, and were well past the hottest part of the day. It was cooling down and gearing up for sunset. We had made our way back toward home, and were less than a 2-minute bike ride from our house. I had been hanging a ways back, so both of my little sisters were in front of me. The youngest was out front, the middle coming up on her left, and myself 6 feet behind both of them. Just a few minutes prior to this, a silver sedan had driven past us going the opposite way. The car's plate number had double sixes on it, which I had called first as we were heading up the street. I heard a vehicle accelerating patiently behind me. This set off red flags because where we were riding, we actually affected the oncoming lane. This vehicle was heading the same way we were. I turned to look and see, and automatically glanced first at the license plate. A silver sedan, Mr. 66. It seemed he was back now. I could see the driver, and he appeared to be a Hispanic man in his mid-40s, wearing a blue and red flannel shirt. He didn't say a single word though. He just looked at me for a second, then sped up, veering around us. I watched in horror as his open driver's side window lined up with my baby sister. He reached out and grabbed her hand and a handle for her bicycle. He slowed down a bit, trying to pull my sister off her bike and into his open window. Something must have happened to his car though, because as sudden as he had grabbed her, he released her again and slammed both hands back on the steering wheel. She took the chance and pushed like hell on her bike, racing towards Dead Man's Ditch. My other sister and I followed suit. After a moment of what I now recognize as tunnel vision, I heard the acceleration of the sedan behind me. By this time, we were all hysterical. I was trying to desperately see through my tears. This guy was clearly not going to give up. Whatever his deal was, he didn't want to let go of my sisters. Dead Man's Ditch was approaching quickly. Thinking on my feet, I directed both sisters down into the ditch, assuming 66 wouldn't destroy his own vehicle, attempting to follow us. My youngest sister cowered in fear at the top of the ditch, being afraid of falling down so far. My middle sister didn't need to be told twice though. She slid down the hill like it was nothing. As I caught up to them, the car was right against my back tire. I told them to just go. I was pretty sure this guy was going to kill us. I remember my other sister taking a huge breath and finally going down the hill. I held my breath until I was right behind her. All three of us made it down to the bottom. The man pulled his car right up to the opening of the path. He got out. I could see he was naked, wearing only the aforementioned flannel shirt, and boasting a giant hard on, which he proceeded to tug and wave in our general direction. I stood between my sisters and this creep. After a few minutes of exposure, I guess he decided we weren't worth the destruction of his car. He jumped back in the driver's seat and drove away. My sisters and I were hysterical, although my 10-year-old mind had switched to business mode. My tears ceased, only followed by my concern. I now somehow needed to get my sisters home safely. We waited for about a half an hour, but the car never came back around. We braved emerging from the trail and hightailed it home. When we got home, we told Dad everything, and he was understandably outraged. He actually took us around in his car to drive around the neighborhood and try to find the man's car. We couldn't find it. My dad called the police once we got back home, and we filed a report. Unfortunately, with only a description of a silver 4-door car with a license plate beginning with 66 and a Hispanic older man, that wasn't enough to track him down. They filled in Dead Man's Ditch a couple of months later, but not before it had managed to save our lives. During my freshman and sophomore years of college, I was extremely awkward. I had just come out as gay, so I didn't have many friends. I was generally kind of a big wad of social anxiety, given I didn't have any social skills to make new friends. It's not surprising then that I had literally no dating experience. Miraculously though, over the course of the summer after sophomore year, I sort of grew out of the worst of my awkwardness. I lost some weight and got a lot more confidence in myself. My self-esteem was a lot higher. I came back to school in August, and by October, I had a decent amount of genuine friends. I'd also gotten a lot more involved on campus. With my newfound confidence, I decided I'd finally download Grindr and see what it was like on there. Now, if you didn't know, Grindr is a gay dating app that's primarily used for finding sex or hookups. Despite my recent improvements in the social arena, I was still extremely naive and inexperienced when it came to dating. I set up my Grindr profile with a nice picture of myself and a very brief bio. I got a lot of messages very quickly after my picture being approved. One guy who messaged me had a display name of Dad4Young, which should have been my first red flag. I was oblivious though. I should note that I also look really young for my age. At the time, I was 21, but I was regularly asked by campus staff which middle school or high school I was visiting from. Heck, I'm 23 now and I still get asked if I want the kids menu sometimes when I go to a restaurant with my parents. It's that bad. So this Dad4Young sends me a message that just says, "What's up?" I replied without looking at his profile first. I looked at his profile after and noticed it said he was 54. His only profile text said the younger the better, and his only picture was a zoomed-in blurry picture of his hairy chest. Needless to say, I was not very interested. Given my own experience though, I thought ignoring him would be horribly rude, so instead I kept replying. I don't really remember what we even talked about in the first 10 or so messages we exchanged. I do remember him telling me that I was very cute though. I know I told him I was a student, but I never mentioned which college I went to. It's important to note I went to college in a major city, and there's a bunch of different colleges all within a 5-mile radius of each other, a few more within 10 miles of those even. Sort of like Tinder, Grindr works based off your location, but much more precisely. If you're less than a mile or two away from someone who's online, it will even display their feet in distance away. I noticed that Dad4Young's profile said he was 25 miles away, which I thought was kind of far. He started to get more sexual in his chats and asked if I wanted to meet up. I felt bad flat out denying him, since he'd been so polite so far. I told him I didn't want to meet up with him that day, but we could keep chatting if he wanted to. I figured that was that. When I checked 20 minutes later, it said he was offline. About 30 minutes later, I got another message from him though. "Hey, I rode a while to get here. Thought I'd have a nice drive out to Canterbury campus." I'd not told him the name of my college, nor the part of town I was in. I looked at his profile, and now it said he was only 3 miles away. I started freaking out a little, and didn't reply to his messages in the hopes he would just leave me alone. My college campus had a couple of different campus chunks separated by a few miles between them. I lived on the upperclassmen residential campus, which was about 2 miles away from the main one, where all the other student dorms and main buildings were. I felt like if he were going to try and find me, he'd at least go to the main campus first. Then maybe he'd give up, since not many outside people know about this separate residential campus. 5 or 6 minutes later though, I got another message. "It's no fun if you don't play along. What building on the residential campus are you in?" His profile now said he was only 2,500 feet away, and every time I opened it up, the distance would decrease even further. I was losing my shit at this point. This guy had the ability to pinpoint my exact location. I shut my blinds and turned off all my lights, and locked my windows as well. My roommate was out of town on some kind of retreat, so it was just me here alone. The door was already locked. I was getting pretty worried. He kept sending me messages every minute or so, saying things like, "I'm gonna find you, here I come," and other supremely creepy shit. The distance was down to just 310 feet now. I was completely losing my mind, and I didn't know what to do. I deleted the whole app off my phone. Nothing else happened that night, though I was absolutely terrified he was going to come knocking on my door. 3 days later, I decided to re-download Grindr after doing a bit more research and seeing you could adjust the settings so your exact location was invisible. When I logged on for the first time to remake my profile, I adjusted some of the search filters until the results were specific enough to display Dad4Young's profile, which I promptly blocked later that evening. I got a message from someone with the display name, "I'll find you," with the same gross profile picture. My stomach sunk as he sent me a flurry of messages. "You screwed up. I almost got caught by the police because of you. I couldn't find you, so I had to go to the other dorms and find someone else. He ended up calling the police on me. I'm not giving up, though. I'm coming for your sweet vanishness." I freaked out and blocked him again. I deleted my profile and deleted Grindr as well. I refused to re-download it or any dating apps for about a year after, at which point I finally worked up the courage to try again. I've not heard from that nut job ever since. I used to date a guy named Norman back in high school. I'm 29 now and have a 9-year-old daughter, so this must have been at least 12 to 13 years ago. I guess we were each other's first real love/relationship. We even wore promise rings, which was a pretty big deal back then. We talked about getting married and what our life together would be like. Basically, things people say or do when they've been together for a year as teenagers. As things go, we began to argue unfettered, though, to a cycle of breaking up and getting back together. I was immature and stupid, and I ended up getting with another guy during one of our breakup periods. It became a messy love triangle situation, and Norman and I finished up for good after I chose this other guy. Not exactly my proudest moment, but I was 17 years old and incredibly stupid. Fast forward a few years now. I made a Facebook account, and out of curiosity, I looked up Norman. We added each other on Facebook, and I messaged him, apologizing for what happened between us back then. I was happily married by the time, and had just had my daughter. Norman was a good sport about it, and we remained amicable friends via social media. I rarely ever spoke to him though, only to say happy birthday or randomly comment on one of his statuses. Another few years go by, and Norman gets into a relationship with a woman called Marissa. I was happy to see him moving on in life. My marriage hadn't worked out in the end, but I was happy with my life raising my daughter by myself. During Christmas one year, I found an old Polaroid picture of Norman and I that we took during a cabin weekend we had taken together whilst dating. I messaged him and recalled how fun it had been. He didn't reply. Later, I found out I was no longer on his friends list. A few months later after that, I got a message from Marissa. She basically said I was a and that she'd seen the message I had sent months ago. She told me to never contact him again and that I needed to get over him. She went on to say how a charm bracelet he gave me back then was nothing compared to what he gave her now, and I was just a cheap shag he had during high school. I never responded. I got off Facebook not long after for a short period of time, before making an entirely new profile and adding only close friends and family. Over the next few years, I would constantly get ads from people I didn't know on my social media. I knew it was Marissa because the first account I mistakenly added began sending me tons of abusive messages saying that I would never find love. Afterwards, I didn't add anyone else I didn't know personally. Somehow, though, she kept finding me on different accounts. She even tried to add me on Instagram, Twitter. Somehow, she even found out my phone number. She tried to add me on WhatsApp, too. When Snapchat became a thing, I immediately got an ad from a user who had one of my Facebook friend names as their username. I added them, only to find out it was her pretending to be them. I kept blocking all her alternate accounts and maintaining no contact. Honestly, there was nothing else I felt I could do. This year, I joined a dating app and met a guy within the first few weeks of being on it. I thought he was amazing. His name was Nate, and he had a fair few pictures of himself as well. He was average looking, so it didn't raise any red flags with me, that this suspicious-looking guy was trying to talk to me. He had an Android phone, so he couldn't FaceTime, but we would speak on the phone regularly. It was definitely a man's voice. We texted a lot over the next few weeks, and things seemed to be going well enough for a meetup. We scheduled a time and place a week beforehand. He asked me about my past relationships. I didn't think too much of it when he asked me about my very first real one. He seemed real keen on the details and asked me if I still had feelings for that ex. I reassured him that I did not, but I also didn't hate the guy. I was the one who'd messed it up in the first place. Nate said he was really looking forward to meeting up with me. We had chosen to meet in an outdoor cafe because I didn't like the idea of meeting someone at my house without me actually knowing them. I was so excited. It was my first online date in a long time, so you can only imagine my confusion when I noticed a woman smile and start walking over. I was too shocked to say anything when she sat down. Of course, it was Marissa. She looked so smug. "Hey babe," she called out to me. She kept smiling and confessed it had all been her. At that point, I just wanted to know why. What did I ever do to this chick to get all this harassment from her? For her to even invest her time into doing this? Basically, this is what she told me. 6 years ago, when she and Norman got together, he told her all about me and our first relationship. She went on to his friends list and saw me there. She then went through all my pictures and posts, trying to see what he saw in me. Then, when I messaged him, she confronted him over why I had any pictures of me and him at all. Why did he need to have me on Facebook? So he deleted me and promised to never speak to me again. She told me she hated me and that I was a stupid bitch. She wanted to give me a taste of what I had done. She made up accounts so she could keep an eye out on me and tried to make sure I would never be in the same city as her and Norman. She would walk by places I'd say I'd like and go inside to make sure I wasn't meeting up with him in secret or something. She even found out where I worked. She said the guy I spoke to on the phone was her friend who was in on the whole thing. She had originally planned to make me fall in love with Nate and then have him cheat on me, but she couldn't stand to wait so long. The most disturbing part, though, was when she came to my daughter. The woman had become extremely fixated on her. She was convinced that she shared some of Norman's features and became obsessed, thinking I'd had a kid with him who I'd kept secret. She told me to not even think about revealing this secret to him. She would be the only one to give him a baby. I was beyond horrified. The ending's not very exciting, but I remember getting up from the table and telling her to never contact me again. I got in the car and just sat in there in silence for a while. The first thing I did was call my daughter's school and let the front desk know of a possible situation where someone who is neither her father nor I would try to pick her up. I then called my brother and told him what happened as well. He urged me to call the police, and I did. I ended up getting the whole spiel of how if I didn't have documented proof about her saying these things, they couldn't help me. It's been 2 months since, and I haven't heard anything else from her. My brother thinks that maybe she got what she wanted by asserting herself as Norman's one and only. Maybe now she'll finally leave me alone. I still have a massive paranoia, though, when it comes to what I post on social media and where she might be lurking next. I even had to tell my family and close friends about the situation and warn them not to add any strange profiles or people they didn't know. Well, I wouldn't put it past her to know my address and stoop to peeping in our windows or worse every once in a while. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.